Can everyone hear me okay in the back? So thank you very much for the First Presbyterian Church of Huntsville Choir. That was wonderful. We'll hear again from them later on. So if you don't know me or recognize me, my name is John Crisler Jr. Thank you so much for everyone for attending today. I know a lot of you have traveled very far, and it's really, really meaningful for us for you to be here today. So thank you very much. Okay, so here we are. I'm about ready to give a speech, and one of the biggest things I've been struggling with lately is words. I can't really find words to communicate a lot of different things. One of the big things is, what is this event even called? So we settled on a celebration of John Peacock Crisler Sr.'s life. That's what we're calling this. I don't know that I've been in a very celebratory mood, or my family has. Other than the obvious grief and heartache that we're all feeling, I haven't had the words to really describe how I felt. What am I feeling right now? So like a good engineer, I decided to research it. And the best research tool is Google. So I got onto Google. And I started looking up some words, and I found a few that I can now add to my vocabulary. One of the words is lugubrious. Lugubrious means mournful in an unrelieved manner. And I thought, well, that certainly is part of what I'm feeling. Kept looking through Google. I found a Russian word called toska. Toska means a sensation of great spiritual anguish, a dull ache of the soul. And that certainly is very true as well. But I still didn't feel like I was finding what I was looking for. So I came across a Portuguese word. It's saudade. And I've listened to it 20 times. I think that's exactly how you pronounce it. And it said a missingness. A missingness. Bringing sad and happy feelings together. Sad for the missing, and happiness for having experienced the feeling in the first place. And then it said, the love that remains. And the love that remains is exactly what today is supposed to be about. This is not a conventional gathering, very non-conventional. And non-conventional is a word that comes to mind when I think of my father every time. He was a non-conventional person. In addition to non-conventional, another word that kind of kept coming up my mind these past several weeks is contradiction. So I would believe most everybody in the room knew my dad. Some liked him, some may have loved him. But I bet most everybody in the room probably would describe him in different ways. Some of the thoughts that came to mind is my dad could be one of the quietest people in a room. But if you ever talk to his kids or grandkids, we would try to describe him as one of the loudest people in the room. My dad was a very smart, very wise person. But some of his blunders were very memorable. And I will touch back on that a little bit later. He was largely introverted, but I never would have thought to call him shy. He was one of the most laid-back people I've ever known, but he did have a need to control things. And there were certain situations that was very important. And last, some might think of my dad as a very serious man, and he was a very serious man. But humor is one of his most defining qualities when I think about my dad. When I was a kid, there was just nothing more rewarding than making him laugh and to hear his laughter. And as an adult, that remained with me. There's a picture, a couple in here you'll see of us laughing, and that was a big thing for my father. Laughter and humor was very important. Another thing, the memories that have been on my mind a lot lately is our shared name. So there's a tradition of juniors and thirds in the Crisler side of the family. And me being a junior was a source of aggravation a little bit as a kid. There was a lot of confusion, who's being talked to. The male was a little confusing sometimes. And as a child, I was aggravated by it to the point that I knew my son would not be a third. But I can say right now in front of everybody that I've never been more proud to have his shared name. And I'm very, very happy that that's the case. People will say a lot during this time that Dad's memory will live on in all of us. And that's something people say, but for me, it's certainly not a saying at all. I hear voices in my head. I hear voices in my head ever since I was a teenager. Those voices are my father's voice and my mother's voice, and they're always there, and I'm listening to them. Those voices are telling me to be kind, to be helpful. Those voices remind me to be empathetic, don't be judgmental. And Dad would specifically whisper a joke or a pun 10 times a day. I hear his voice telling me a joke. And I say it out loud. And if it gets a laugh, I take the credit. If it's inappropriate or not funny, I definitely blame him for that. So I have my dad's name. I have his voice. I even followed in his footsteps with our career. We had the same kind of career working for NASA. So much of him is with me, and it always has been with me, and I know it always will be with me. So I do have some stories I want to share with you about my dad today. It was a running joke in our family that I learned grammar from my mother, but I learned my vocabulary from my father. Many a summer day, he would be outside working on this old push mower, and I would be shooting hoops or doing kid things, whatever. And it was a very frustrating time for him when he was working on that push mower. And I learned a lot of words in those days. I can't share any of them with you in public. I'm really sorry. But I did increase my vocabulary as a child. I remember a lot of road trips with my dad. We would go to Knoxville to see basketball games. We had a period of time we went to Memphis a lot to visit his father when he was in the hospital. And on those road trips, we would discuss all sorts of things. We talked about religion, politics, history. History was a big love of Dad's. And he always had a really interesting take on things. I always learned something. Always walked away just impressed. And those thought-provoking things are things that I try to carry with me and instill in others as well. I remember family card games. Family card games were always a great memory of mine. Usually my questionable bidding came into play. He liked to point out that if my bidding was off. And then if I actually did end up winning and I was a scorekeeper, that came into question a lot as well. Better looking than good was a favorite saying of his. I heard that a lot. Most of all, I remember Dad with kids. You see a lot of pictures up here with the kids, and most of you probably do know. He had no shame of being silly or being goofy. He retained those childlike qualities forever. And that was one of his secrets to life. He knew that retaining those childlike qualities was a secret. He passed that down to my sister and I, and now passing it on to all you. Stay childlike. But my all-time favorite dad story is the one we always call Dad's Glacier. So in the summers for many years, Dad was stationed out in Northern California. Family would go out and visit. In one particular summer, the whole family was there, including his father, and we decided that we were going to go see Yellowstone National Park. So we got in the car, drove to Yellowstone. It was a long day, it was a warm day, and we had already seen all the things that we were planning to see. So we were very tired and worn out, but he had it in his mind that there was a glacier site that he was determined to drive his family to. So we all piled in the car, we make the trip. I was a little confused. I was thinking, this is kind of a warm climate. I don't know how we're going to see a glacier. But I never really challenged Dad on much because he was usually right. And so I just kind of had and said, okay, we'll just see how this goes. We were already tired. He had two teenagers and his father in the car. And so we started the grumbling and the complaining and the whining. And maybe it's just me. I won't throw my sister on the bus. It probably was primarily me. But we were tired and we weren't sure how this was going to play out. So finally, after way more complaining and whining necessary and an expectation build-up that got to be unrealistic, we arrived. So we get out of the car, we all get out, we look around, and there's this big giant hole right in front of us. So there is no glacier, it's a glacier site, and it's where our glacier used to be. He started kind of alluding to the fact that that's what he meant all along, but he wasn't selling it to any of us. So we did all, there's a picture in here of him and his father in front of a big hole. You might see that fly by. So we took pictures. We did the things that you're supposed to do when you're on a trip like that. And then on the way back, we really let him have it. And we teased him. And we just, once again, would not let up, because it was just one of those rare moments where he kind of was a little embarrassed. But so as we teased him, we decided, okay, that's enough. He would quiet down and get kind of quiet in the car. And then somebody would giggle, and it would pop up all again, and we would get on him again. And then we did that, and then he started joining in with us. He was laughing as well. And that's really kind of a nutshell who my dad was. He was somebody who, somebody else in that situation could have gotten really embarrassed and gotten angry about the situation. Maybe he said, okay, that's enough, be quiet. I've heard enough of this. And he wasn't like that. His ego was not impacted by others and what they said about him. And he can make fun of himself just as much as anybody else. And he did that. So I really learned a lot. And that's just one example of what I learned from my father. That was a very powerful lesson. And one of the things that I really live by and speak to, and I got it from him, is actually based on a quote that's in the program today. It's an Oscar Wilde quote. And it says, life is too important to be taken seriously. Sometimes I'll say that and people look at me like, what does that mean? I've had people ask me point blank, what does that mean? So I'll tell you what that means. Life is too important to be taken seriously. It means be loud at times, but not always. It means be in control, but also be relaxed. It means be serious-minded, but laugh as often as possible. It means make fun of yourself. It means be childlike. It means be like my dad, Johnny Crisler. Thank you. Next up, we have Charles Danner with the tribute.
Hello. I'm here with my wife and my son, my wife Mary Lou, and my son Mark. And I have another son back home. He couldn't come today, he wanted to. We Danners have known the Crislers. I counted it up, and I think I'm pretty accurate. We've known the Crislers for 48 years. And we've been good friends the whole time. And a lot of that time, John and family, they were Methodists, but they started coming. I don't know, never asked them why, but they came to St. John Presbyterian Church, just right down the road, where I was the pastor. So much, I synced with what you said, Johnny, so much about your father. Funny, joking, but very, in his own way, very serious about things. And I think I might have a story to tell about that. But anyway, I have a lot of memories of John and family. I'm going to tell one that might embarrass Kara, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't. One day, John and Kara came by and picked me up to go to the grocery store. I don't know why. They just said, let's do it, maybe. Kara was about 3 years old. And we went up to the grocery store, and I bought several loaves of bread. I don't know how many, I don't remember how many, but and I came back out to the car with it, and Kara and John were back in, and Kara said in her little 3-year-old voice, too much bread. And so I explained to her in great detail that what I would do would be to take the bread home and put it in the freezer, and then just get out a loaf when needed. It was just a handy way to deal with bread. So I explained all that to her, and she said, too much bread. But I have a great many memories, fond memories of John. I remember how much he loved tomato sandwiches. White bread, Wonder Bread, you wonder why it's called bread. White bread and mayo and a big slice of tomato. And believe it or not, that combination is really tasty. I've tried it myself. And I have memories of the day that John and I went to Walker Creek in Lincoln County John had just gotten a present. I think it was a present of a fly fishing outfit, and he didn't know how. He'd never done that, and I was an old hand at it. So he and I went wading in Walker Creek and fly fishing. I was his mentor, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And then what other things? Quite a number of things. I won't go into all of that, but I wanted to start with the story of how John, for several seasons, I think, was a coach for T-ball. And if you don't know what T-ball is, probably all of you do, but I'm going to tell you anyway. T-ball is baseball among the little people. And they'd get 3 swings at the pitch, and if they didn't hit anything, then a tee was put out that was adjustable for height, for their height, which was a lot of times like this. It was a lot of fun to watch because you felt like that Charlie Brown and Peanuts had come to life. And but they'd get 3 swings at the tee ball, and you know, early in the season especially, they didn't have a clue. If they hit the ball, they were allowed to go off in any direction. And my grandson, Tyler, now 7 years old, but he's had a couple of 3 years of T-ball. But at first, he was prone to lie down out in the outfield and gaze at the stars. And somebody would have to go out and put him back on his feet, you know. But some of the coaches, their main concern was to win the game, and they'd even get in arguments about the calls, you know, things like that. And but John wasn't that way at all. I don't think John cared whether they won or not. His main concern was for everybody to get to play. I call that treating the little people as persons, and we should treat, you know, little persons as persons because that's what they are. And I have as my authority on that Dr. Seuss, who said that a person is a person no matter how small. And so in the way he treated, that's just an illustration of the way he treated people. And Mark Meriden and I were talking about this a while back, the way he was accepting of everybody. It didn't matter. To use a phrase out of the prayer book, all sorts and conditions of men. He respected them and treated them as persons. I could also quote Grantland Rice. Some of you will know who Grantland Rice was. He was a great sports writer. And his little couplet went like this. I'll have to think just a minute. When that great scorer comes to write against your name, he will not mark if you won or lost, but how you play the game. So, another thing about John, Johnny talked about how he loved to joke and so forth, but his also being serious. John was elected elder at St. John Church, and of course we had training sessions about elders' duties and matters of faith and practice and belief. And John came to me in private, and he said, do I have to believe all these things? To be an elder. And I said, no, you don't have to believe all these things. I think, you know, too often, too much weight is put on correct belief and not enough on the works of love and justice. And that was what Jesus was about. So I'm having to think again where I'm going from there. But, oh yeah. I'm going to back up what John said with a great Archbishop of Canterbury, probably the most influential bishop in the Church of England in the first part of the 20th century. And you may be surprised by what he said. He said, I say all the creeds of the church. I don't believe them. And I don't think he meant by that that he didn't believe anything, but there's a lot that he didn't believe. And he said, but I say them because saying them helps me see and decide what I do believe. And I think that's a good position for a lot of us. Finally, Hannah Arendt, the great philosopher, in her book, The Human Condition, wrote that there are two things about life which we really need to deal with. One is that life is not repeatable. You see what I mean by that? Referring to the fact that all of us have done things and we've said things that we deeply regret. Most of us could give an example of that if we wanted to. But you cannot unring the bell. It's said, it's done. And Hannah said that the only remedy for that is forgiveness. Without forgiveness, we are doomed to suffer the consequences of some of our actions and words the rest of our life. And she credited Jesus for making that point. And we know that he taught at length about prayer in the Sermon on the Mount. And the other thing that she said was about life. Life is uncertain. It's unpredictable. And that insofar as there is a remedy for that, we should make promises and keep them. That lends a certain steadiness to our lives. And we can't always keep our promises. But depending on the situation, the situation and so forth. But the important thing is, as best we can, to make promises and to keep them. And another blank spot in my brain. The key point, the point I'm making. I call that faithfulness when we make promises and keep them. And that's the most important thing I remember about John, his faithfulness to promises that he had made.
This is going to be tough. I'm not going to get through this without crying, so I'm just going to warn you. And I'm probably going to read more than I like because I think it'll help me. So, the last 24 days, we've been doing an awful lot of wondering what kind of impact did Dad have on people? Was it the same as he had on us? And looking around the room, I helped answer that question. And it's really supportive for us to see you all here. Some very, very dear people in the room. we've been doing, of course, an awful lot of big grieving. The best way I know to say it is Dad is a real hard human to live without. So one of my revelations has been, this morning it's not about the should'ves and the could'ves. The morning that we've been having is about the absolute loss of all the gifts Dad gave us. I mean, there's really just a mountain of celebration on the other side of the morning. And so I do want to focus on that. Dad wasn't a material man at all. The most expensive thing he ever bought were his bats. I'm serious. And maybe a Prius or two. But it ended there. Instead, he gave a constant flow of invisible gifts, the very best kind. So I see these as his legacies, and I think there are many more, but I wanted to touch on 5. Love and acceptance. Some say unconditional love doesn't exist. I get that. But I could honestly stand here and say to you that I felt nothing but unconditional love from my father. He didn't spend any energy judging people. He really didn't. He spent energy just trying to accept, and he was very successful at that. And as a child, this brought me, and I'm sure my brother, and I think all of us in the family, such emotional safety and trust. Like, it's the biggest gift you can give a human, and I received that from John. My gratitude is immense. I celebrate this above all. Related to this was the warmth, the care, the connection that he, I think, tried to give all of us through his hugs, a lot of tickles, a lot of humor and support whenever we asked for it. Yeah, this sentence means a lot to me. I could love him and feel loved by him with all the ease in the world. It was just so easy. Deep gratitude. Legacy number 2, understanding. A lot of you might not know this, but Dad spent a lot of time trying to understand all of us. He really wanted to know what motivates us to do the things we say and we do. And he and I had a lot of conversations about this. We had fun asking why. Why? What would drive her or him to do that or say that? I think Dad would have made a great psychologist because of that, and because of that skill he had, but also because of his listening skills. Did you guys know this? He was just an amazing listener. If you ever tried to share something with him, he was going to listen with this intention to understand you. So I know he had a big impact on Johnny's career. He had a big impact on mine too. Something totally different, which is more in the area of psychology and helping people. And I do that through trying to understand them. And so yeah, he and Mom had a huge influence on me in that way. So I just wanted to share a little story about how his drive to understand people led him to be quite empathic at times. Our daughter Nadine had just been born, and Danny and Nico was 2.5 years old, Mom and Crystal, and Danny's parents, the DeFrieses. We all went to a beach house in North Carolina, and we weren't familiar with this house, of course. And there were 3 little steps that led to the living room, and Nico, being 2.5 years old, forgot about the steps, and he took a tumble down the steps. And we all tried to reassure him that it was okay. We all make mistakes. I don't think Dad said a word. What did Dad do? About 5 or 10 minutes later, Dad took a tumble down the steps on purpose because he didn't want Nico to feel alone or stupid or silly. It was so beautiful to me. Dad didn't use a lot of words. He just tried to be his accepting, understanding self. So legacy 3, it's been touched on, of course, lightness, humor, and fun. Dad read the comics every Sunday morning, his whole life. And he would say, you need to read that one, because he wanted us to laugh too. I couldn't be around him without laughing. It's hard for me to look at all the pictures, but every time I look up, I see me laughing, it seems like. He threw out more zingers than anyone I've ever known, other than my brother. And Johnny, I would say you have big shoes to fill, but honestly, the last several years, Dad would say to me with a prideful smile, damned if your brother hasn't gotten funnier than me. And he was proud of you for that. He could take it. Legacy 4, honesty. For a long time, I've known Dad for his very uncanny skill for being honest while not putting people off. This is not easy. It's really an art. He valued being truthful at all times, and he cared about relationships with all of us. So he developed this really unique way of being authentic with lightness and humor. I hope you guys know what I mean. I'm not the only one who saw this, surely. I just loved this about him. I drew a lot of inspiration from that, and yeah. Don't think I'll ever manage it, but I'm really going to miss that. Okay, legacy 5. Perseverance, commitment, and reliability. I think mostly through his lifelong, well, as far as what I've seen, his lifelong hobbies of baseball, softball, and also singing, he showed these qualities. I really thank all you softball buddies for showing up in your jerseys. It really touches me. And the choir members for singing today. He loved being a part of your team. And I imagine you all experienced him to be as reliable as we did. I hope so anyway, because it was important to him. I could give a lot of examples of how we witnessed that. The one I'm holding closest to me now is, oh wait, sorry, that was the wrong line. What I want to share with most, I guess, is just how much it means to me that Dad passed up a lot of promotions at NASA. I mean, I don't know about a lot, but he passed up promotion after promotion for a while because he didn't want that added stress. He didn't want to value the extra money over being at home with his family and being a fun, dependable dad, granddad, and husband. So those are the 5 legacies that really came up to me, and I wanted to share today to honor him and thank him and show my extreme gratitude for being the kind of father he was to me, us. It's been hard to find some silver linings. You know, in our family, we try to do that. You know, there's got to be a silver lining in everything. It's been hard to find one in this, losing Dad, other than all these celebrations we have for him. There is one I'm holding close to me, though, right now, and it is, he never had to go without playing ball. He was running to first base just about a month ago. He never had to go through life without singing. And he never had to tell any one of us that he couldn't help us out. He would have hated that. He wouldn't have liked to have been a heart patient. He just really wouldn't have liked that. And I'm happy for him that he didn't have to be, that he could instead just live in health side by side, especially with his beloved wife. So, in case some of you don't have the program in front of you, I also picked out a quote. It's one of my favorites. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson's definition of success. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know even one life is breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. I breathed a lot easier because my father lived, and I'm guessing a lot of you did too. Or at least more fun, or whatever. Dad role modeled this for me, this definition of success. The world feels a bit less safe for me now, less humorous, a bit less fun. But he'll always be with me, helping me to carry out this meaning, this definition of success. What a legacy. I feel like apologizing for going so long. I want to end with Dad's own uplifting words. His strong suit wasn't writing. He didn't leave letters or much of anything behind, but I did find one piece of correspondence on his computer, and it was a letter to one of his grandchildren. And I'm not going to read the whole letter, but just a piece of it, because I think there's a beautiful message in this for all of us. And he was not often vulnerable, but he was vulnerable here. He wrote, "I had a terrible time as a youth committing to things. I could always see how poorly I might do, and not so much how well I might do it. I was literally frightened of everything." Hard to imagine. "I could not comfortably give an informal presentation to people I knew about things I knew until I was in my late 40s. I discovered very late that with a better attitude, I could have pushed myself at a young age much more. A wise man," and I'm pretty sure this was Viktor Frankl, someone he admired a lot, a Holocaust survivor and psychologist. "A wise man once said, 'The only thing you can control in life is your attitude. Others will almost always control the circumstances you find yourself in.' Realizing I can give myself a better attitude about anything is the single most powerful thing I've ever had going for me. I and you will do anything better if we can put ourselves in a positive attitude about doing it. Not always easy, but doable. Doing as many things as you can, as well as you can, is really what growing up is all about. And having fun." Signed, Jay. So in closing, let's try to follow Dad's wisdom and choose to be positive, because life sure seems short. So sorry. I forgot. Mom is going to spare us the time that I didn't. She wrote a statement and asked me to read it. I wanted to segue by saying, behind every great man is a great woman. We all know that quote, and Dad certainly knew that too. He called Mom his best friend and meant it. This is her statement. "I want to thank every one of you for sharing in this memorial for John. He was the most honest, reliable, steadfast man I'll ever know. I can't express in words the profound loss I feel."
Wow. what a tribute for John Crisler. Y'all knew him pretty well. Anybody played ball with John Crisler got to know him pretty well. During the good times, during the hard times. And thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Marilyn. Several weeks ago, we had lunch with John and Marilyn at Big Bob Gibson's in Decatur. And during the luncheon, I reminded them that my brother Gene married them at the home of Jesse Floyd and Ruby Monks across the road from the church. And I reminded him I sang at the wedding. Johnny, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Aren't you glad you did not make singing your career choice?" I didn't think he'd remember, but evidently he did. John was a realist. He was not prone to sentimentality. He held my feet to the fire many times. He stepped on my toes many times. But I want to share with you, it's hard to give up someone you love. Really hard. But it's even harder to give up someone who loves you. John Crisler loved us all, or we wouldn't be here today. Your love and your support speaks more than could ever be published. So we gather together. John was a source of love for Marilyn and the children, for Ann, Jace, Kara, Danny, DeFries, Nadine, Nico. I've heard in the Netherlands. Is that right? How do you pronounce it? The Netherlands. Your grief. It's only as deep as your love. And if you love deeply, you grieve deeply. Grief and love express each other. Talking about grief and what happens in it is not the same as grieving. Our grief is probably the last connection we have to the one we love in this life. And the rest are memories. If you have a memory you can't talk about, it hadn't been healed. That's what I find that needs to be healed the most in people, are the memories. Jane and I have known John and Marilyn for 54 years. We were 23, 24 time. I think that we all grew up together. The babies were born. Beautiful babies. What a joy it was. We grew together over the years. John, the scientist, and I was the novice and experienced theologian. Charles Danner, he stepped on my toes and kept me honest. And he never would let me get away with anything without going back and looking at things again. And he loved to learn. He read everything. He explored knowledge in many fields. He caught my interest. I caught his interest. He was a nuclear scientist and engineer working on the Lunar Rover module and the Hubble Space Telescope. And I took a road less traveled at Emory University, Canada School of Theology. I did my clinical training at Emory University and at Eggleston Hospital working with children. and I was director of pastoral services at Charter Retreat Psychiatric Hospital for a number of years. And when I got stressed, John Crisler was my go-to person. There are many times he helped keep my head above water. He was my rock. I would go to him for clarity and simplicity. And if you don't like clarity and simplicity, don't go to John Crisler. Because he always told the truth, whether you wanted to hear it or not. And I guess that's why we grew together. And he was a man of faith. He wanted to know everything. He did not wear his faith on his sleeves or try to overpower people. He just enjoyed singing in the choir and playing softball. There's a phrase in 1 Corinthians 13 called the love poem by the Apostle Paul. He said, love suffers long, has a whole description about what love is and what love is not. But in verse 8 he said, love never fails. Prophecy, preaching, sermons, religious words, they'll all pass away. Where there's knowledge, it will vanish. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Love never fails. Love never failed John Crisler. You being here, giving support to his family, is proof of that. Love never failed John Crisler. And he related to everybody, had no fear of intimacy. He always kept it real. He was non-pretentious. He loved singing and traveling with the choir, playing baseball. He thought a lot of you guys. And your love never failed him. And I want to say, after knowing him all these years, John Crisler never failed to love. He loved not only the people around him, his family, his friends, people he worked with, played with. He loved people he'd never even seen before. In our that luncheon we had together, he was had a lot of feelings about children being separated from their parents after walking thousands of miles. I could feel his grief in that. John Crisler never failed to love. Do you remember that scene where Jesus' disciples were in the upper room, locked behind closed doors, living in fear? They thought what happened to Jesus was going to happen to them. You remember that? And then Jesus came and stood among them. How did they know it was Jesus? He showed him his hands and his side. He held his hands up to them. Isn't it interesting? They didn't do a whole lot of cosmetic surgery on him. They didn't clean him up. He didn't put his hands in his pocket. He didn't put them behind him. He held his hands up as if to say, this is what life has done to me. And I'm here to affirm with you that life is good. John Crisler told me many times, life is good. I'll always remember John saying that. He sometimes said it when I felt like I was losing it all. Life is good. This is how I see John Crisler. He was always truthful. He was always forgiving. Forgiveness heals. I've never seen violence or hatred or resentment heal anything. Have you? Forgiveness heals. John Crisler was a forgiving person. And so we all have our nail prints. And John's one of mine now and one of yours. But life is good. Life is good. If you've never had a friend to share your life, your deepest thoughts and feelings, you're an orphan of the universe. John struggled with many things in his life. We laughed at things, we cried at things. We went crazy together a couple times. I already enjoyed that. Your passion is where your craziness is. And John knew how to enjoy himself. And I would like to hear some of your stories about John Crisler. I'll share one with you here. We went on vacation together. And one time on our way back from Florida, John was driving. And he had this crazy craving for blackened smoked fish. And every few miles, he'd say, I wish we could find us some blackened smoked fish. You remember that, Marilyn? And he stopped the car, turned around, and went back to this little place beside the road. And sure enough, there was a sign outside that said, "Black smoking fish." John went in. He bought the fish. He came out, and about that long, wrapped in newspaper. We put him in the back seat. He cleaned that fish all the way to Montgomery. He cleaned every bone in that fish. And when we couldn't stand it no more, we hung our heads out the window gasping for air. And when we did, he just laughed and laughed and laughed. He thought that was so funny we couldn't tolerate that smelly fish. We had that car steam clean, but the smell never left. But I always remember him laughing. When John was enjoying something, he laughed. When he was enjoying things with you, he laughed. His laughter will never leave me. But it'll heal me. It'll heal you if you remember. So, what are some of your memories? Anybody have something they want to share? I mean, this guy was so crazy, somebody got to have something to say. He enjoyed life so much. And I'm sure, I don't know if the ball team wants to talk about it, but I'm sure they have some stories. And like I said, John was unconventional. I love that phrase. He was unconventional. He was a realist. He was a person who felt deeply, who loved deeply, had a deep faith. What are some of your stories? Anyone? Okay. This lady over here, I know you.
I was in that car.
She was in the car.
I have to say that aside from my father and my husband, I love John Crisler more than any other man I ever met. And you know that. We just hit it off. Well, and I'll tell two things, and it all happened the same weekend. We were serving our second congregation in Galesville, Alabama, stuck off in Cherokee County, and John and Marilyn came that weekend, and we were really going to try and show them a good time. Well, I'll back it up. John had went through a spell of wine making. I don't know if any of you ever got to taste any of John's wine. Okay, you know. So I wasn't at that time a big wine drinker, and he was always wanting me to drink some of his wine. And I've got a great batch, Jane. You've got to try this. Well, I'd take it, and I'd say, you know, can't stand it. And I did that several times. So this weekend that they were coming to Galesville, I thought, okay, he's probably going to bring wine, and I'm going to like it, no matter what. I was going to be nice. Sure enough, got some wine in the car, brought it in. I took a glass, and it didn't smell great, but I went ahead and I actually swallowed it. And he was just standing there looking at me. And then I went, actually, I think I threw up. And he died laughing. He died laughing on the floor because he said, "How did it taste?" And I said, "It tasted like dirty socks smell." And he said, "Yeah, it was sour. It was a bad batch. I thought you wouldn't even drink it once you smelled it." I thought, oh my goodness. Well, so this same weekend, I decided to cook, and that was something I didn't do a lot of. And of course, Marilyn is the best cook in the world. I mean, really. And so after church, we come home, and I've got ham and sweet potatoes and a couple other things. And I made homemade biscuits. This was that same weekend, hadn't I? And so I didn't know that John didn't like ham or sweet potatoes or whatever else it was. So he looked at me, and he wasn't eating, he wasn't enjoying it. Finally, he said, "Okay, Jane, pass me one of your damn biscuits." So I picked the biscuit up, and I threw it, and it bounced off his forehead. And he never got over it. I got him that time, and I think some of you may have heard that story. I don't think he ever got over it. But that's one of our closest, funniest memories. I loved him to death. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Anybody?
Okay. Danny DeFreeze.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually couldn't help myself and put some words down. And I realize now that I actually was talking to John, so I'm just going to talk to John. Dear John, when you stepped out of the train on Central Station in 1991, just to make sure one more time that it was indeed the right train, you probably had not expected that these Dutch train doors would suddenly close behind you and would plunge Marilyn in a 2.5-hour journey to the unknown northern Netherlands where they had never been without you. So I know from experience that these doors don't open again. You can push the buttons and they'll just stay shut. And I can only imagine the expression on John's face at that point, like, oh my God, they had just gotten off the airplane at Schiphol Airport. So it was not much later that Kara and I, all the way in northern Groningen, received a phone call at her dormitory from the National Dutch Railway. "Is this Miss Kara Crisler?" "Yes." "Yes, hello. We just wanted to inform you that your mother is on the train to Groningen, but your father is not." We had contact with our station personnel and know that he will be on the next train from Amsterdam. I had never received a call from the National Railway myself. Did not even know they were in the business of tracking foreign tourists. But John and Marilyn had a way of making an entry into the lowlands. So 1 hour later, I met Marilyn for the first time in my life, and I was 19, in the railway restaurant. A little flustered, she recounted how the so kind people on the train helped her make sense of what had happened, and had notified the conductor that her American husband was not with her. And it all worked out 1 hour later when John arrived after all. This is how I met my father-in-law. He did not like to be out of control, not at all. So how much he must have hated, in my imagination, because I was not there. I was in the Netherlands with my children. When he had to let go suddenly of all control a few weeks ago, when the medical world took over suddenly. And I keep on thinking about the train metaphor for the last days of his life. Suddenly the doors closed for John, propelling Marilyn and Kara and Johnny and Lisa and Anne and all of us and you all on a journey that no one really saw coming. And this train, however, only has one opportunity to jump on. There's no second chance. I think Mac already spoke about that as well. So I lost the most beautiful father-in-law. And in the 13 years I lived in the United States, and before and also after that, I met him when I was, like you heard, I think I was 19. John was like a father to me as well. Someone who taught me a lot about patience, about how to enjoy life, how to enjoy the moment. He told me about postponing unnecessary ambition, something Kara also mentioned. About how to deal with a Southern woman. Not always an easy challenge. About dedication to his wife, about dedication to his children and his grandchildren. That it is okay to walk around in a torn t-shirt if you just enjoy that. And eat popcorn on Sunday evening for dinner. I can only be grateful for all the time that I was able to spend with John Crisler. There is no second chance in the train of life, and yet it is very consoling to see how during the journey there are so many people here, the community and friends gathered, just like the Dutch railway system, just like the people on that train, just to help Kara, Johnny, Marilyn, all of us through the rest of this journey. So thank you. And thank you, John. You'll be missed.
Thank you. Who else? Anybody? Come on. Here we go. All right, here. Okay. This is Andy, John's brother.
My name's Andy Crisler. I'm John's older brother. We always called him wrong-handed. I didn't know anybody that was left-handed besides him. I love John. I can't remember if I ever told him that. We roomed together as freshmen in college. He refused to room with me the second year. I had the habit of keeping the window open at night, and when he could not get the toothpaste out of the tube because it had frozen, he said, "That's it." So I didn't really see him too much in college. You know, it was a very small school. We had 600 students. I really never asked him what he wanted to do after he graduated from college. He knew what I wanted to do, and when I graduated, he was a junior, and I left, and I was kind of shocked to find out that I started medical school in the end of June, didn't really have a summer break, but he didn't go back to college in central Missouri. He had called NASA and asked for a job, and they said, "Well, if you go to the University of Tennessee and get a degree in nuclear engineering, we'll hire you." So he went to UT, and at that point, I guess I should have known that he was interested in being in space. He had formed a rocket society in his junior year, instead of chasing girls like every normal sophomore and junior, he was forming a rocket society, and they were building a solid stage rocket. I guess that should have been a tip-off that what he wanted to do later. I guess it must have really been a thrill when they would test fire the Saturn rocket here in Huntsville. It's supposed to be a secret because they could hear it over the whole county, and some of the people thought it was an earthquake. It shook the ground for the whole region. He really didn't talk too much about what he did at NASA. I don't know whether he just wasn't supposed to or what, but I was so proud of him. And when he died, somebody said, "John, you did good."
Well, thank you, Andy. Anybody else? Had any drinking buddies or no? Go ahead.
Well, my name's Crisler. I've known John
Okay.
for
Yeah, good, thank
well over 50 years. Okay. Thank you. Well over 50 years because we have some things in common. We both did go to UT in engineering, and then we came to work for NASA and had a long career at NASA. But we started playing ball together with the NASA leagues in what I think was the early to mid 60s. And we either played with, or I played with him or for him, or for all these many years. Now, I try to think of some funny stories when you were asking for funny stories, but I don't really have too many funny stories. John was, one thing that we did not have in common was that he was a great player. But when he played outfield, particularly in those early years, he was focused. And if you were playing beside him in the outfield, you better watch out because you could not call him off of a fly ball. And I saw a couple of collisions for people that didn't learn that lesson until that, because he was focused, and he was a great hitter and a great home run hitter at that time. I think while I'm on softball, one of his favorite teams, and you've seen a picture of him up there, was Young at Heart. Young at Heart was a team that was formed by Gene Erb, and everybody was over 45 years old and probably under 55. But we played in the National League, and we also played other teams, and I think we destroyed opposition. And of opposition were all much younger teams, and that was my great delight for John Crisler. And you see up there about Young at Heart. And the people from Young at Heart, some of the people, including John Crisler and Bobby Elkins and Fred Garcia, guys that my softball buddies here know, helped form this Huntsville Senior League that we all enjoy so much. And John and Marilyn loved Tennessee basketball, so did I. And John kept me informed over the years on Tennessee basketball. He was analytical, and particularly in the off season, I would get emails or talk to him, and he would tell me about the players that were coming in and who couldn't go to his left and who had a slow first step and things like that. And the last time I talked to him, we talked about Tennessee basketball. So we're really going to miss John in the softball league, and I miss him a lot.
you. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Here we go. Come here. Yeah. Come on in.
Hi.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, the last thing John told me when we had lunch together, I gotta go home and play my team.
Yeah. So my brother Danny asked me to read a message on behalf of our parents. They are in the Netherlands right now. They would have loved to be here, but my mom just had a hip replacement, so they couldn't come. So they asked me to read that on their behalf. But before I do that, I just wanted to tell you how incredibly thankful I am to be able to be here. And I think it's just beautiful, a number of beautiful tributes, really amazing to be part and feel all that love in this room. And also incredible to see all these pictures and realize what I never knew, how much Nico actually looks like his grandfather. It's, that's truly John the Third, I think. One other thing is I wanted to also tell Marilyn that I'm still really thankful for your hospitality years and years and years ago when I was in the United States for the first time. And I must say that your home is a little bit of heaven. I haven't heard anybody say that, but I'm sure it's quite different now. But yeah, I just wanted to express my thanks for that one more time, just being there and all my memories. Anyway, so let me read my parents' message. Dear Marilyn, family and friends, we're so very sorry to everyone that John passed on the 4th of July. We regret that we cannot be present in person because of the surgery of Tini not allowing us to fly from the Netherlands, but we're glad that our daughter Crystal and her girlfriend Stephanie and they can also still represent us, and of course our son Danny. John was a lovely husband, a great sportsman and a beloved granddad, as anybody can tell. We're very grateful to have known him. We never forget our first game of bridge with John and Marilyn. We talk a lot here about his baseball, but in bridge apparently he was a big star too. He was a very clever bridge player, and when we were together in the cabin in the Smokies, we had just learned the rules of the game. So we lost enormously, and John showed us how to successfully win a game. But Marilyn had a lot of compassion, and she was feeling so bad for us, and she says, "I'm so sorry for you." And I'm like, "John, please stop." So, but anyway, some years later, we did get our revenge, because I don't know if I'm saying that right, that word, but revenge. We were on the beach of Wilmington, North Carolina, with our grandchildren, and John simply had to admit that the Dutch are really very good tunnel builders, because they were, my dad and John, I just saw some pictures, they were always building sand castles and tunnels, and the grandchildren loved playing with them. And so, and that's definitely something that the Dutch are known for water management and building and so forth. But anyway, he said my parents said we had several wonderful times together in Scarborough, where Danny and Carrie used to live, and in Tennessee and in the Netherlands. We will always keep John in our heart, and we hope you all will help Marilyn to accept a life without a beloved husband. And we wish his children and grandchildren, who will also miss him dearly, lots and lots of love. So may John rest in peace. En continue de Vries.
Come here, Lisa. Yes. This is Marilyn's sister, Lisa.
Well, actually, my name is Melissa, but my family always called me Lisa, so either one is fine. Marilyn tries to call me Melissa. I am John's sister-in-law. He was more of a brother to me than a brother-in-law. I loved him dearly, and I knew he loved me. And most importantly, he loved my sister, his children, and his grandchildren. He accepted me from day one, which I was about 13. That was why he treated me like a sister. And the favorite thing that John did, and he didn't do it too much longer, and I'm 66, been a long time, he loved to tickle my feet. And I hated it. And the more I hated it and the more I screamed, the more he did it. Our sister, as someone said earlier, would say, "John, quit." And he'd say, "Well, she hadn't had enough." Or some little crack, and he'd keep going. But I would always laugh, even though it hurt so bad. And Christmases, holidays, birthdays, I was always put in the barrel, which is easy to do. My nephew did too. Kara did some. Marilyn didn't. She just was sweet like that. But I have some of the memories that will carry me for the rest of my life with John. And he gave me life. And I loved him so much, and still do.
Bless you, Lisa. Anyone else? Anyone else? We'll have a committal, and then after the prayer and the committal, the choir will sing for our closing. Let us pray. O God, who gave us birth, you are ever more ready to hear than we are to pray. You know our needs before we ask, and our ignorance in asking. Give us now your grace, that as we shrink before the mystery of death, we may see the light of eternity. Speak to us once more your solemn message of life and death. Help us to live as those who are prepared to die. And when our days here are accomplished, enable us to die as those who go forth to live, so that living or dying, our life may be in you, and that nothing in life or in death be able to separate us from your great love, Christ Jesus our Lord. For as much as the spirit of John Crisler has entered into life immortal, we therefore commit his body to its resting place, but his spirit we commend to God, remembering how Jesus said upon the cross, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." Amen.
Again, thank you everybody for coming. Please be real safe going back home. Thank you.